Hello, this is going to be hopefully a quick run through on getting an extension, building one for the 6 millimeter plug on the Yetis. They used to offer it, I think, in 8 or 9 foot lengths, but they discontinued it. So if you need one, you have to either find one on eBay that's new old stock, or you build your own. So what I did was I went to my local electronics store, meaning it's one of those old ass places that has diodes, resistors, wires, weird connectors, for actual radio building and electronics. And I took my light of life with the 12-volt adapter because it's proprietary, and I told them that, hey, I need some connectors that are going to fit this. So what we ended up coming up with is an equivalent that they had in some bins, which is this one here. So you see there's a male and female. And what makes this not fit in the Yeti is there's a sleeve in here that's like recessed. So when you plug this in, it doesn't go in all the way. And you could see that on the Goal Zero one, where the connector comes together right here. These tips are the same length, but you see this is recessed because of their locking deal that they use, and this one is not, but this is thicker than this. So when you plug this in, it doesn't go in all the way and make the connection. So what I did is I got the one, I already made an extension already just to show. I actually got this and used a belt sander, 1-inch belt sander, and I put it on there and I just spun it by hand. And I took this 12-volt adapter here, and every now and then I would check it to see when I got down to the point where it would fit. And obviously I could see I took off a little more than I should have, but it doesn't matter. As long as this fits all the way in, you're going to be fine. Belt sander that I use is just a generic belt sander that you would probably have in your workshop, or if you have access to one. Worst case scenario, go ahead and use some sandpaper. It'll take a little longer. And yeah, so that's it. You do this, get this all put together, and then this is going to fit in place. This is the other side. I just have this because I'm going to be showing you how this kind of goes together. And then this plugs into here, which is doesn't matter because this isn't going into a recessed plug. It just fits right into the generic plug that you get. So if I turn on my Yeti, this is already on, but you see it works. So I got high, low, off, and it's plugged in, no problem. So I have myself an 8-foot extension cord that I just have to heat shrink after I'm done showing you guys how this goes together. So yeah, that's it. The connectors themselves, there's a male and female, obviously. So when you actually get these and start setting them up on your cable, you're going to want to make sure that when you slide this on to your cable, and I'll show you when, that you use the right sleeve that it came off of. These ones in particular that I bought, here's the male part. I'm going to set this aside here on the bottom, this one on top. There we go. So top, bottom, you can see that the diameters are actually different, so they won't interchange. So just pay attention to what you're doing so you don't have to desolder and cut or whatever. Just slide it together and make sure you don't mix up the two. So when you go to actually screw that on, it fits where it's supposed to. The next thing you're going to want to do is get your cable set up. So what I do with mine is, for the length of the connector right here, I measured out for this particular brand and make, it's about 1 inch and a quarter. About 1 1/4 inch of this that I need to cut off. So what I do to cut it is I use a razor knife there, box cutter knife, and if you put too much pressure on it to cut it, you're gonna probably cut through this and you might nick the inside of the insulating part of the wire there. So what I do is I kind of try to just use minimal pressure, so when I bend it I get that little stress line, and then I just kind of finish it up so I don't nick the inside of the cables. This comes apart, you can actually pull it apart, you'll hear it kind of snap. Some most will have this little, what they call a drain. You're going to get that, and you're actually going to get rid of that. So you're left with your two wires here. So this one that I picked up at the electronics store, so I got the connectors, I got the wire, also picked up some Anderson plugs, the ones that they use for the high power port. And this wire is what they call 16-2, so it's a 16 gauge wire, 2 conductor, and it's insulated. It's got the sleeve on it. You can find it in gray. It's basically just speaker wire. It's labeled as audio cable 2 conductor 16 AWG. So if you find that, that's what I used here. 16 is about it's a bigger size than what's coming with the Yeti stuff. So here's the adapter cable for the 12-volt adapter for the Light of Life, and if you compare the two, you can say that the cable that I picked up is thicker gauge than what Yeti Goal Zero provides you. So I'm not really concerned with, you know, stringing 8 of these lights up and having it heat up or draw too much or have some kind of problem happen with the cable, because if they're using a smaller gauge, then, you know, 16 is fine. So if you do a little smaller diameter cable, you might be able to get the sleeve to go over the insulation. But for my particular, you know, choice in cable here, this will go and it pretty much stops here. So I have to be careful how long I cut this insulation so I can get these to stick out enough where I can actually solder them in with the connector. So then I can later slide this on and thread it back closed. So you see, I on this particular one, which is the male one, I did 1 inch and what was it, 1 1/4 inch. Better too short. You know, I could actually cut a little more, which I'm probably going to do after I'm done with this video, and cut it here so this cable comes out. And you'll see on the other connector what the deal is. So the way I put or set this up is, yeah, so I cut the insulation off for you guys. You can see it's too short, so on the male one I need to cut more. So that's fine. And then on this side, the opposite side, I went to the next step. So I tin the, oh, actually this isn't the next step. The next step is this. I'm making a bunch of them. So when I take the insulation off the wire, I like literally barely get a little bit off, because what happens is when you apply heat to this, when you solder, this actually will shrink back a little bit and expose a little more wire. So you can see on this one here, you can barely see it, but it kind of just did that. You don't want to put too much heat on it, because if you put too much heat on it, the solder actually seeps and gets sucked into the wire, and then like this whole wire will be hard and it won't flex because the solder literally just got sucked up into the wire. So just use, you know, the minimum heat necessary to get just the tip soldered on, get solder on the tip of that wire. So yeah, go ahead and take your cover off of here, your insulation cover here. Just go ahead and take a little bit off of there, and then don't even do this one, the negative wire. You want to do this one first before you even tin it. Just go ahead and get it. So because what the deal is, and I set this one up for the female side, what you want to do is pre-fit it before you solder it. So you're going to need to actually tin these two, so the positive and the negative. I'll go through how I found that out for you guys. So what happens is it's going to be placed under like that. You see the negative is shorter than the positive. So the reason you don't cut the negative one first is you want to see where the positive one ends up. After you do this cut, so you see the positive one's going to end up there, and you can see like how much longer the negative one is, so you can cut it down just a bit, so you don't get too much wire way in the heck up here. You want it to end a little bit after where this will clamp down, which is what you can see on this. You see that? Again, minimal heat, because you don't want to overheat the connector and you don't want to overheat the wire. Okay, so you're going to solder that here, solder that there. But before you do that, I'm going to show you how I got where the voltage is. So just to let you guys know, on these it's center positive, and how I figured out that it was center positive was I got this male connector, made sure that these were nowhere close to touching, plugged it into here, grabbed my meter, and carefully I checked to see what the polarity was. And like I thought, and like some of you that know electronics probably know, it was center positive, which means this outside one is your negative, which is the outer ring, and then this shorter one is positive, which is the little connector inside there. So yeah, center positive, and then the ring outer part, the sleeve, is negative. So that's how I figured that out. Yeah, so next steps are, we already did this, which was making sure that this fits. And the build on this, and I'm going to take this apart so you see the reason. So you see, this is already touching the insulation here. So I had just enough room to solder this in place and solder this in place. Now this here is shrink tubing. So before you put this thing together, there's steps, and you need to pay attention to the steps, because I kind of goofed it the first time and it's just all bad. So what you do is you have your cable that you set up, tinned, ready to go, like let's solder this together. But what you got to do is you have to make sure, number one, that your outer shrink tubing is cut. This is cut to 3 inches. This is going to slide on first, because this is going to go and cover everything when everything's all finished up. Second thing is you're going to want to, since this is set up for the negative, I mean not the negative, the female part, I'm going to get this, make sure that it does fit the correct part, which is, I know this is for the female part, so I know that's going to thread on when I'm done. So this is going to go on second. Okay. Third, and this is where I goofed, I forgot to put on the shrink wrap for the positive. And then after you have all that, which is your outer shrink wrap, that's going to close up your connector. Your inner shrink tubing, then what you're going to need to do, and this is where controlling your heat, you know, pays, is I'm going to solder the positive one first here. And the reason you don't want to overheat that is once you do, the heat's going to travel down the wire and it's going to start to shrink this tubing. So you have to kind of be careful with it, with your heat. Get it and just, you know, just enough heat to get it to fuse. Hold it there, let it cool down and, you know, be all joined together. And then actually just leave this alone for about 5 minutes, let it cool down. And then what you do is you get your shrink tubing and you pull it forward and cover the wire all the way up as far as you can go, just so you don't have any danger of something shorting out. And that is shown on the extension that I did right here. So you see, I haven't quite finished it yet because I wanted to make this video. So this is the outer, there's my sleeve to finish the connector up. But you can see I actually got my shrink wrap all the way up against the connector. So now if this gets squeezed together or something happens, I know that this isn't going to short itself out. After this is all done, you know, get this, close it on up. And for me, the last step for me on this particular part of the cable is getting this. And you're gonna have to check this before you pick what size shrink wrap you're gonna use for the outer sleeve and for the inner sleeve, depending on what wire gauge you use and what type of connector you get. They're probably all going to be the same because I'm sure they're all from the same place overseas. And make sure that when you slide it, it covers all that. So not only does it make this look nice, it actually does help if it rains or something. It's not going to make it waterproof, but it's going to make it, you know, where it's not going to have anything leak in there. And then it also helps with you know, when it flexes, you're not going to get a break in here. It's going to help that a little bit. So what I do is I just get the soldering iron I used and I kind of just rub this around here and get it to shrink, unless you do have a dedicated heat gun where you can shrink it. We do, but I'm kind of lazy. I just kind of just get this and it shrinks and it's good enough for me. So yeah, that's kind of it. I just really need to do the same thing with this side for the male part. Same process, you know, this goes on first, then you put on the sleeve that closes everything up. Shrink tubing on the positive side. Again, watch your heat, and then solder it, slide it forward, shrink it, and then do your negative, and then this slides on and closes up. This is going to go over here. So then I shrink this side, and there we go. There's a 8-foot extension. As far as the wire gauges go, and if you're kind of concerned about overheating or the amperage and all that stuff, there's two places you can check online. One of them is Engineering Toolbox, and I'll let you pause the video or whatever. You can see, hopefully you can see the website there. It's engineeringtoolbox.com slash amps dash wire dash gauge, and it pulls up information about the length in feet versus the current in amps, and it gives you a breakdown of wire gauges. And then this first table has to do with cable length in feet. The second table has to do with the same thing in meters. So you could see in the one with feet, it's telling you that 16 gauge is for 10 amps. I mean, you're good for like 40 feet. These lights, I think in a string of 8, maybe pull, on a bad day, I think they may pull like maybe 5 to 8 amps. Again, the wire gauge that Goal Zero uses is smaller than this diameter, this gauge of cable. Don't think there's going to be a problem stringing 8 and using an extension. I think you're going to be fine. But if you want to geek out and check this, that's cool. There's another site also. It's rvandplaya.com. How many amps can the 16 gauge wire? And they actually have some pictures and information here on well, actually it's a little bit better than the other site. They get into some aluminum stuff which you skip over, and then you get into towards the end you get into actual application for kind of this stuff right here, and it talks about that. So you know, I did my research. I'm happy with what I selected and what I'm building, but you go ahead and do your own. Make sure you do it in a manner that you think is going to be safe and best for you. And if you have any questions or comments, I mean, by all means, throw them in the comment section. And good luck if you're going to go ahead and do this. Oh, last thing. So the reason I took this with me is, number one, to make sure that I get something that fits, but then just to be double sure, because I know this says 6 millimeter, and to verify that, like, you can go ahead and grab some calipers if you have them and measure them out for the size here. So you see the Goal Zero one fits in there, and the aftermarket one fits in there too, just the same. And so now that we know that these are the same size according to this, if you go ahead and pull it up on a ruler, and I'll try because they're both silver, is you can see, and I guess I'm going to hold it and you can pause it if you want where you think you have the best view, but it's just over the 6, just a little bit. So on the internet, you know, if you go to Amazon or all these places, they're going to say 5.5, and you know, they're going to say 6, but if you look at the specs, it's 5.5. Those, you know, that's a roll of the dice if you want to pick them up like that. They may not fit. You might have a bad connection, or if you do have a bad connection because it's not right, that's when you're going to probably get into heating issues or arcing, and it may cause problems. So and again, I'm just moving this so you guys can get a view of it, because since it's bright in here and everything, I don't know where the best view is going to be. But that's the reason why I took my Light of Life with me to the electronics store, so we could match it up and and make sure that it's connecting properly, because if it did with the lighted life, I know it's going to connect to the Yeti 400, or whatever 6mm Yeti you have. So yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to show you guys, is how I actually measured it. But to be super sure, make sure you take this with you if you have one, or if you're going to get one, do get it, because these are great. These are great lights. This is why I made the extensions, because I'm going to use these all over the place. I'm actually going to buy more and string them together. Like, this is how great this light is. But when you do get it, take it with you to the electronics store, so you make sure that they fit. You're not going to use this one to try to fit the female part, because it's just never going to fit. I'm sorry, I made that back. Yeah, so don't take this one and decide what you're going to use, because this is going to fit all day long. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab grab this part, and if it fits here, then you're good to go. Just remember, you're going to have to probably grind down the other side like I did. Where the heck did it go? Yeah, you're just going to make sure that, don't worry about this part, because this part you can probably get to fit. And when you do, sand it down, take your time. Like, you really need to take your time, because there's this makes this wall so thin that you may damage it where it doesn't like come together anymore. So I really took my time when I ground this down to make sure that I didn't take too much off, and to also make sure that when I did get it to fit, that there was still some wall left with the threads that's going to actually come back on here. So that's where you're going to have to be really careful when you get one of these and you sand it down, that it's still able to thread back on to the metal part of the connector. So yeah, just be careful. And yeah, like I said, guys, go ahead and leave comments. I know this video is going to be long, but I'll tell you what, I don't edit anything. I just go through it, and what you get is what you get. And you can go ahead and comment on that and tell me that sucks, like, whatever. It's, I'm just kind of doing this to help people out that had questions on it, because it's not really out there on how to build a cable. You can find them. Like I said, you could find the discontinued cables, but no one really has got anything out about the 6mm cable and making an extension. So that's why I decided to do it. 8mm, different story. You can still get these all day long on the internet, either from Goal Zero and pay the money, or you can find aftermarket ones and pay less. So not a big deal. All right, guys, thanks. You guys have a good one.